In this video, I'll be demonstrating some front bumper repair items on a naturally aspirated Porsche 944 to include bumper removal and installation, bumper pad replacement, bumper shock replacement, and front turn signal maintenance. The US specification 944s like this one came standard with aluminum front bumpers, two large rubber bumper pads, also referred to as bumperettes or impact strips, right and left turn signal markers, and two pressurized bumper shocks used to affix the bumper to the car. Because the rest of the world had different traffic safety standards at the time, you'll often see sleeker-looking fiberglass bumper caps on most of the Euro cars, as came standard, all while offering little in the way of impact protection, but aluminum bumpers with impact absorbers were available as an additional option via code M058. If you'd like to replace your bumper pads, turn signal assemblies, or bumper shocks, the bumper will need to be removed from the car, and it's pretty easy to do as it's mounted using only two 19mm bolts that are accessible through some holes found on the underside of the bumper. With these bolts removed, the bumper will rest on the bumper shock mounting brackets until it's pulled away from the car. If corrosion has set in, you may need to wiggle the bumper a bit to break it free. Remember at this point that the turn signal wiring harnesses are still connected, so what you can do is attempt to pull just one side back a few inches, which will create some space to disconnect the wiring, then rest that side back on its mount and repeat the process for the other side, and then the bumper can safely be removed from the car. With the bumper removed, we can see that the bumper pads are secured using two 10mm lock nuts, so those can be swapped out without too much trouble. Once they're loosened, they can be adjusted slightly left or right so that the curved section will sit flush with the bumper during reinstallation. While the turn signal bulbs can be replaced by removing the lens cover with the bumper installed, the assembly itself is affixed by 3 screws, 2 of which cannot be accessed until the bumper pad is removed. These OEM assemblies are no longer in production, but there are some aftermarket options available. In this case, I'm going to be replacing the protective rubber boots on the left and right turn signal wiring harness connectors, as they tend to crumble with age. Again, another part that is only available as aftermarket. I got these from Partworks in Germany, and I'll include a link to those in the description. In order to replace the boot, you'll need to use a terminal extractor tool to push the pins out of the plastic connector so that it can be removed, slip the new boot onto the wiring harness, and reinsert the terminals into the connector. With the new rubber boot installed, the wiring will have some additional protection from the elements and future corrosion. In addition to the rubber boots, I'm replacing the rubber drainage lines as well on the back of each assembly that have aged out with a new set that I also picked up from Partworks. While I'm in here, I'm also going to be replacing one of the bumper shocks that was previously compressed and later popped back out. Even though these shocks can be popped out to their original position, they are single-use only since the compressed air and oil is expelled on impact. Like many cars from the 1980s, the US specification naturally aspirated 944s came standard with bumper shocks or energy absorbers on the front and rear bumpers. When these cars were introduced, there was a 5 mph bumper impact standard under the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration that required there be no damage to parts and surfaces not involving the bumper system, for example, neighboring sheet metal, headlamps, and so on. But after performing a cost-benefit analysis later, the agency decided to reduce the bumper standard to 2.5 miles per hour in 1987. In the interim, these cars were left with this elongated-looking front end to meet those safety regulations, which offers a bit of nostalgia to the era. While the bumper shocks are no longer available from Porsche, used ones can be found for between $40 and $50 a piece. They are secured to the frame using two 13mm bolts, so all you need to do is remove the bolts, slide the old bumper shock out, insert the replacement, and reinstall the bolts by tightening them to 20 Newton meters or 15 foot-pounds. Now that the new bumper shock and turn signal wiring harness boots have been installed, it's time to mount the bumper. It goes on in the reverse of removal, so go ahead and get it placed into position on the car. Reconnect the turn signals on each side, and once it's properly lined up, you can install the two 19mm bolts, which are torqued to 65 Newton meters or 48 foot-pounds.